Aunt Lydia comes to visit and she ain't right, more so than usual. Sexuality educator. Welcome to my recap and review of Handmaid's Tale, Season 3, Episode 2, Mary and Martha. You can like and share this video. You can subscribe to the channel. And now we're going to get right to it. In this episode, June goes to the supermarket with her walking partner OfMatthew. Back at Lawrence Manor, Aunt Lydia comes to visit and she ain't right, more so than usual. Meanwhile, in Canada, Luke is day drinking and avoiding interacting with baby Nicole, who now lives with him, Moira, and quiet Aaron. Emily visits a doctor and learns that she can have clitoral reconstruction, and also her blood pressure is high. June wants to help Lawrence's, Martha's, Beth, and Cora get another Martha named Allison to a place for things. Lawrence is suspicious. June tells him what they're up to. He's like, fine, whatevs, do your thing. June and the Marthas drop Allison off at a safe house in the dry cleaning district. We find out afterwards that Allison is a maker of bombs, including Off Glen 2's bomb. In Canada, Emily has dinner with Moira, Luke, and Aaron, and things get awkward when Luke presses her about not calling her wife. Back off, Luke. Allison comes back to Lawrence Manor with a wounded handmaid. June and the Marthas hide them down in the basement. Guardians show up and Mrs. Lawrence is on point. She distracts them with an offer of a hot drink. The wounded Martha dies in the basement. Allison leaves. Lawrence is super fucking patronizing and gives June the scolding of a lifetime. June buries the body of the dead handmaid in the backyard. The next day, June meets her walking partner OfMatthew, who gets on my last nerve. Emily calls her wife, and I find out that I will not be making it through this episode without crying after all. Let's talk about what is happening with our characters this episode. So glad that Beth the Martha is back. I have a character crush on her. I loved her in season 1 when we saw her in Jezebel. For a while, I was like, oh, I kind of maybe want Nick to wind up with her because she's super hot. I also feel like she could be a really good mentor for June. She really seems to have a solid head on her shoulders. She's really smart. She's paying attention to everything that's going on. Really glad she's back. I really hope that she's more of a character this season and we see more of her. Speaking of Lawrence's Marthas, Cora's relationship with Lawrence seems very different this season than it did when we first saw them last season. Last season, she was sassing him. She seemed very relaxed around him, very brazen. This season, it's like she's new. Like she doesn't know how to read him. She clearly didn't understand that he values honesty. She seems deeply insecure. It just, like the dynamic is completely different this season and I'm kind of curious as to why. Does Aunt Lydia have PTSD from her attack? Was it being at that staircase that triggered her and set off a flashback? Does she maybe have a brain injury or does she have both? When Aunt Lydia is violent, she is disturbingly calm about it. This time, she was raging. I suspect that Gilead does not prioritize mental health care, especially for women, and that is a problem. Aunt Lydia with all her faculties is already dangerous enough. An out of control Aunt Lydia? Like, no one is safe. Nobody needs this. I really, really, really want Moira and Emily to bond. Maybe they could be BFF, and then when June escapes and gets back, she could join them and they could, like the three of them, be BFF together. Maybe they could date. I'm not saying I don't want Emily to get back together with her wife. I'm just acknowledging that Emily's life and her wife's life have diverged a great deal through no fault of their own, but sometimes, you know, you can't overcome that. If they didn't, I wouldn't be mad if Emily and Moira, like, got together. Or, I don't know, maybe Emily and, what's her wife? Sylvia and Moira are poly and they can like be in some kind of relationship with each other. I'm okay with that too. I just think that Emily and Moira can understand each other in a lot of ways that most other people can't because their experiences have been so similar. They experienced the early persecution of Gilead, you know, because they were both queer women. They were both forced into sexual slavery. I think Moira would actually really respect and understand why Emily knifed Aunt Lydia in the back, and I think she would actually respect that. They have both actually murdered people in Gilead. They both escaped Gilead. My point is, platonic, romantic, whatever, I feel like, yeah, they would make a really good team. Team Moira and Emily. I am also starting to wonder if I misinterpreted Mrs. Lawrence's behavior last year. I felt like they were very much giving me Mad Woman in the Attic signals. But after I see her in this episode where she seems kind of, fragile and emotional, but also very, very lucid, seemed to know exactly what was going on when the Martha was in the basement. Now I'm thinking, okay, maybe I misunderstood. I've heard some people wonder if she's faking being crazy, and that's possible. It's just The Handmaid's Tale doesn't tend to do that kind of gotcha stuff with its characters where we're like, oh, this character was faking it all along. Now this season has been different. It's like this just has a different vibe, so maybe that's it. Or maybe I just assumed she was crazy because the first time we saw her, she was very emotional. And yeah, like she was yelling and screaming and upset and, seemed like she had been crying or was about to cry, but that's actually not an unreasonable reaction to have emotionally, given that, the person that she married and presumably once loved turned out to be like a raving misogynist. Sorry, traffic. This is a character I find very intriguing. I want to see a lot more from. I want to gain a better understanding of, where she fits in to, this whole cast of characters. I want to talk about Luke. So we see Luke, he's drinking in the day. He's got his dossier full of, newspaper clippings and files and forms. He doesn't have it all together. And a lot of people are tough on Luke and think that he's fairly passive. And he did. He waited too late. He did not realize until it was too late how serious Gilead's uprising was. And now a lot of folks seem to feel like he is not doing enough. He is not being active enough in terms of trying to save June and Hannah. But I'm not really sure what more he could be doing. I know in a lot of movie and TV narratives, when a man's family is in peril, we see him, being extremely active, overcoming every obstacle, guns blazing, will not stop until he saves his family, which is very satisfying to watch. This show is a little more grounded in reality, and in reality, there are refugees and asylum seekers all around the world who have had to leave beloved family members behind in dangerous, dire situations. And I'm sure the overwhelming majority of them desperately want to go back and desperately want to save the people they've left behind, but they just can't. Luke is not a trained assassin. Luke does not have the authority to commandeer the Canadian military to back him up while he storms into Gilead. Even if Luke knew exactly where June and Hannah were, which he doesn't, getting to them is nearly impossible at this point. Gilead doesn't have any road signs. Just even getting back to the greater Boston area would be so difficult. He would need help, but he doesn't know who to trust. Presumably there is a border patrol. There are guards everywhere. We know Gilead has drones. The most likely scenario is that Luke would be killed within hours of crossing back over the border, and then it's done. He's never going to see Hannah and June ever again. Luke is stuck in Canada doing things this low-key bureaucratic way. I think that's extremely frustrating. I don't think that he's dealing with his frustration in the best possible way, but I'm not sure that I would either. I don't think a lot of us will. So I can cut Luke some slack there, at least in terms of the why isn't he doing more to save his family. I am intrigued by OfMatthew, even though the girl is getting on my last nerve. There's something about how extreme she is and, how bought into Gilead she seems to be. And it makes me suspect there's something else going on, because there's a couple of moments where, the actress as the character, it's like she's really, really internally pushing something down. One of the other reasons that I'm intrigued by her character is I find myself wondering if I would be like her were I in that situation. My parents, when I was growing up, sort of taught me to navigate living in a white supremacist country, in a white supremacist culture, by assimilating. They thought that that would protect me. Doesn't protect anybody, but it's very much ingrained in the way that I operate. And in my adult years, I really had to work to undo that. It's a process. I think it's something that I may be working to unlearn for the rest of my life. In times of duress, when I feel threatened, I have a tendency to revert back into that assimilationist mode. And I could see if I was under extreme duress, like in Gilead, and my actual life depended on it, that I might very much go back to that, okay, let me just do what they say, be exactly what they want me to be so I can, survive this madness. Maybe that's why I'm intrigued and I can't be totally team OfMatthew needs to go. Commander Lawrence is a jackass. I probably shouldn't be surprised or disappointed by that because we knew he was an architect of Gilead, and it's unlikely that the architect of Gilead would be this feminist ally. Yeah, but he's super pissing me off. His whole "you're like a child and you want too much" speech to June made me so angry. It is something that people in positions of privilege and power like to say to the people they're oppressing. You should be grateful that your circumstances aren't the absolute worst they could possibly be. Meanwhile, the people saying that would lose their minds if they had it twice as good as those people. They act like, oh, you're being completely unreasonable because you want access to the freedoms and resources and basic human respect that I just take for granted. And I'm not here for it at all. So shut up, Commander Lawrence. Let us talk about the production of this episode. I find grocery stores in real life to be very cheery, life-affirming places. They have like fruits and vegetables and they're nicely lit. You're buying food. Food is the thing that nourishes you. I think it's a credit to the production team, like the set design team, that they have created this grocery store that is just fucking creepy to me. It's really, really clinical and sterile looking. I don't know cinematography, and if you do, comment below and tell me if what I think I'm seeing is what I'm seeing. It feels like when they do the grocery store scenes, like they bump the exposure a little bit and it's very slightly blown out because all the white seems extremely harsh, and that gives it this very cold, clinical, non-grocery store feeling. There's a scene after June and Beth have dropped off Allison where they're walking down. It's sort of like an alleyway, but it's got like this sort of glass roof over it. That alleyway is in a part of Toronto called Yorkville. Toronto is where I live, for those of you who did not know that. It's very surreal that a lot of Handmaid's Tale is shot in Toronto for me. I keep forgetting that Gilead is supposed to be sort of the Boston area. I keep in my head thinking Gilead is Toronto. It's also a little bit scary and troubling to see my home transformed into this misogynistic, violent dystopia. Like, it gets a little bit creepy. Emily gets a referral for clitoral reconstruction, which is an actual real thing. The clitoris is a structure that's made up of the head, which is the sort of little ball part that we're familiar with. There's the shaft, which extends back underneath the clitoral hood, and then branches down into two vestibular bulbs. Sometimes they're called clitoral legs, and those are like behind the walls of the vagina. When somebody gets a clitoridectomy, more commonly known as female genital mutilation, not only does removing the clitoris make it difficult for a person to experience like sexual pleasure, sexually pleasurable sensations, it can make intercourse extremely painful. After Emily had the clitoridectomy, there were only a couple of scenes, I think, where we saw her in the ceremony, but I just kept thinking, like, she's got to be in so much pain right now. Because I'm not a surgeon, I can't describe clitoral reconstruction in detail. Essentially, what it is that the clitoral shaft is sort of pulled forward, so part of it, protrudes outside of the hood, the way the clitoral, sorry, what is that? the way the clitoral head would. There's been a lot of reported success with clitoral reconstruction, both in terms of patients regaining sexually pleasurable sensation, also in terms of sort of restoring the look of the vulva. I also just read a study of people who suffered relapsing PTSD as a result of having clitoral reconstruction. What the study described was that you know, it is a surgery, and post-surgery you are going to have pain as you recover. For some patients who had undergone female genital mutilation, the clitoral reconstruction and the pain associated with that surgery sort of triggered memories of the pain of having had the mutilation in the first place. So I'll be interested to see if the show continues to address Emily's like sexual healing as a part of her overall healing and processing post Gilead. I want to talk about Moira because she's in this episode a lot. Moira is my favorite. I love that she, you know, is spunky, she's resilient, she's bright, witty, smart, supportive, kind, like all the good adjectives. I really hope that the show and the writers give her a role beyond being supportive to the white people, to the men and the white people. Moira has been through it as well. She has been through a ton of shit. There's an archetype of the strong black woman, and it sounds flattering on paper because it's like, oh, you're a black woman, you can handle it all. You're so smart, you're so capable, you're so whatever. Like Luke even says it to her, you always have your shit together. But that stereotype can also be very dehumanizing. It perpetuates this idea that we don't feel pain, that we don't need help, that we don't hurt in the same way that other people do, that we're never vulnerable. That a lot of times we don't get access to the same level of you know, medical care, mental health care, community support that white women might get, because we're seen as, no, you're just tough, you can just handle it, we can do whatever to you and you'll be okay. We almost never see Moira break down, you know, even when there's times where we can see she's struggling, most of the time she's very stoic and contained about it. I think I've only seen her as a character cry twice, when she and Luke were first reunited, and then when she found the pictures of her fiance who had been murdered. And I'm sort of contrasting that with the way they're dealing with Emily and her post Gilead reintegration. And like, we can see Emily is really shaky. Emily's very emotional. Like, Emily is crying. Emily's having a hard time talking to people. Emily is visibly scared, and that makes sense. Moira has been through like almost as much, really awful things, and so I'm like, yeah, let her fall apart. Like, just once, let her fall completely apart. Doesn't make her any less amazing, it just makes her as a character human. Those are all of my thoughts on the episode for now. In the comments below, let me know what you thought about this episode, things you noticed, how you feel about the characters, what you want to see moving forward, want to talk about the show with folks. So yeah, comment down below and we will have a discussion. That's all for now. I hope you have a great day and I will see you soon. Bye.